Hi everyone, this is a special edition of Which Car Should I Buy? One of the biggest headlines in the last few days was the crash test of the Maruti Suzuki Victorious by Global NCAP. Unlike Maruti, you know, in the past, especially the cars from Maruti, this car didn't just get 5 stars, it also got a very high score. It started with a Desire last year, and now we have the second 5 star car, which incidentally was also 5 stars for child occupant safety from Maruti Suzuki. The Desire had 4 stars, remember. So, why is that a big deal? Well, many reasons. And the first and most important, perhaps, is the huge shift at the company towards standardizing safety and its vehicles. Now, the whole idea of doing this today is to also be able to run you through what's sort of the correct way of looking at some of these tests, at these results. But I would also love to hear from you. And we have all of you who are joining on YouTube, also some of you who are joining from Instagram. So, seeing a lot of you saying hello, it's great to have you. But please go ahead and also keep sending in your questions. And even if I don't end up answering it right away because I might miss seeing it scroll up, I am going to definitely answer it in the comments. So don't hold back, is the whole point. Now, here's the whole thing about why we are doing this. We've seen a steady increase of safety equipment across all Maruti cars over the last few months. And now, structural safety is also being given a lot of importance. In fact, the Victoris is, or I have to say, the Victoris was probably the first Maruti ever that you would have not imagined having ADAS. We thought it's going to be the e-Vitara, but it's the Victoris. The importance also goes to the company's reputation because despite huge sales for all these years, there's been a growing and very steady criticism in the public domain about Maruti's safety record on its cars. And it was the one big differentiator in many ways, right? Besides maybe design, that other brands like Tata or Mahindra could really sort of rub in Maruti's face, really showcase when it came to the build quality, capability of their vehicles, and of course, how they performed in crash tests and for the last so many years. Now, the question is, with Maruti gate crashing the safety soiree, does it become even tougher for the others to stand out? The simple answer is yes. And I would love to know what any of you are thinking about this. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put those in here, and we're going to definitely try and get to them. Because, as I said, I want to be able to clear up a lot of doubts, and there have been a lot. We had some questions coming in already, and we've got Basha who had written in saying, in my opinion, it's too late for Maruti. It has been almost a decade that Tata and Mahindra started focusing on the safety aspect. Once the trust is gone, it's gone forever. After you've earned a title, coffin on wheels, the damage has already been done. Let me take another one because lots of such questions that also came in. A lot of people asking very similar questions, in fact. MK1985 said, will this similar European model be sold in India as well, or is this the non-safe Indian model? Well, first, let me quickly address that. As of now, this is the only place that it's been launched. India is the only place that's getting the Victoris, but Suzuki is now using India as a base for its global supplies, and testing from the likes of Global NCAP or Latin NCAP or Euro NCAP now suggests, I'm talking about tests that have already happened, that a similar spec and structure is being built for all markets. Don't forget, a lot of these Suzuki C platform or hard-tech platform cars are supplied as Toyota models worldwide. So not just Maruti Suzuki or not just Suzuki badge. And this is unlike the past where our Swift was not as safe as, say, the European one or even the first i20, which was even made in the same plant in India for India and the world, but those two cars did not necessarily have the same safety capability. All right. Once again, looking down here and trying to figure out if there are some good questions. Abhishek is asking if Global NCAP ratings are trustworthy. That's a point I'm going to address because there's also a lot of cynicism around this, so I will come to that. We've also got more questions that are starting to show up. Is BNCAP different from GNCAP, which is more authentic? You want me to stick my neck out? Well, I'll tell you they are different for sure because the specifications or the parameters, Deepak, are different in both cases, but there's a lot more overlap or commonality than what is actually different. So are they the same? No. And both agencies have their own sort of logic in terms of how they are setting these parameters, but the logic of what they are testing is very similar. So you have side impact, you have pole impact, or the pole test, you have frontal offset. Those things, of course, are similar. In some cases, the speeds or the parameters or the weightages or the loads may be a little bit different. Also, how the test results are analyzed could be a little bit different. We don't have the time to get into the science of it, but yes, I hope that answers your question. Soul Food says, are the standards the same in Global NCAP and BNCAP? So yeah, Deepak's question was the same, and that's what I have just answered. And like I said, I will come to some of this as well, because the other thing that I'm going to speak about today is why so many of you seem to believe that none of these crash tests should be taken at face value. Why so much cynicism? For some reason, I see just not just cynicism, but a lot of you, even on Instagram, for example, almost dismissing these results outright. I see things online that this is a setup, it's a paid activity, it's false, outright lies, the results have been bought. Look, you're free to think whatever you like. But all I will say is that at the end of the day, we have to hold on to something. We have to have something to hold on to. Let me put it that way. There is a reason why I, for example, aligned myself so closely with Global NCAP. Not just now, I mean, it's been like more than a decade. It's because India had deplorable safety standards. And whether we like it or not, it is this push that began in 2013 that allowed us to not only have amendments in our Motor Vehicles Act, which now makes every car made in India a whole lot safer than it used to be back then, structurally, otherwise, in terms of equipment as well. But also, we've seen many manufacturers going beyond those regulations, the new regulations. It started with Mahindra and Tata, so many of you have pointed that out. But so many more since then, right? Volkswagen, Skoda, even Nissan, Renault, Citroën, Hyundai. Now, of course, Maruti also going in that direction. All right, so glad to see that many of you are watching. Thank you so much. And glad to see that many of you are also asking questions. Do you think the Victoris will take away the momentum from Mahindra and Tata? Yes, million-dollar question. We also had a question about, whether it's still a tin can from Maruti. The build quality and 5-star NCAP ratings are two different things. That's a question that came in from Sharad Kumar. Look, both things are related, right? Like, should Mahindra and Tata be worried because they were tom-tomming better safety standards? And are structure and 5 stars two different things? Actually, no. They are more closely related than you can imagine. These are the kinds of misnomers that we have to stop propagating online. Because a lot of times people read this and then they just start believing it. Is there any system, any institution that is completely incorruptible? Perhaps not. But there is a science, a method, specific parameters, engineering inputs that are tested, which all go back to not just the build quality or the structure, or how that structure can absorb force and then distribute it at the same time of the crash or accident. So if a car looks like it has crumpled up in an accident, the point is, what part of it is crumpled? How much of the cabin structure, just the cabin part of the car, remains sound without any intrusions? And that's what these tests are looking for. Not whether the car looks, sort of tinny, or it's too light, or, it's more easily repairable after the accident. It's what happens to the occupants. That's what we're looking for. Thank you again. Lots of questions coming in. I have some interesting questions. And no, I'm not going to get into rumor mongering at this point. Sindhi FC, this one is for you. Let me stick to the topic at hand. Anand says, in the future, will we see more 5-star rated cars from Maruti? Of course, I hope so. I certainly hope so, because it seems to be a step in the right direction. And what's good here is that it's not just the Global C platform, the bigger cars from Maruti, like the Grand Vitara or now, of course, the Victoris. We also saw 5 stars from that hard tech platform, which makes the smaller cars, like the Swift, the Desire. It will be great to see an Alto or an Espresso getting 5 stars. And so, yeah, I certainly hope that that's the direction this goes in. Excited Electron, love that handle, says, does ADAS make any sense in India? Okay, this is a larger question. And so I'll quickly address it because it's a nice question and a lot of you have this doubt. Simple answer, my usual way of saying this, yes. Look, ADAS makes sense anywhere because it is trying to take chaos in the environment into account and trying to preempt or prevent bad situations. You need good infrastructure, you need lane markings, but ADAS also works for somebody suddenly cutting into your lane. Emergency braking helps you there. Or Sometimes you are distracted. You're talking to somebody, or dare I say, looking at your phone. Lane keep assist will bring you back inside. Adaptive cruise control will prevent you from getting too close to the car in front of you. I mean, there are so many nice advantages of ADAS that even the irritants that people don't really like in everyday driving, you get used to that. ADAS is actually a good thing to have. Okay, so there's also lots of myths around these crash tests, right? I mean, people constantly disbelieving these crash tests, I was saying. What are those myths? What are the reasons that people disbelieve these crash tests or don't really think that anything that's being told to them is really true? Lots of questions coming in on Insta as well, so let me also quickly open that up so that I can keep a track of it. But coming back to the first myth, I want to spend some time dispelling these myths because obviously I don't want any of you to have the wrong notions or the impressions. The first most obvious question that I see a lot of doubt gets raised every time I talk about crash testing or we post a story or a result of crash testing, the speed at which these tests are conducted. So let me talk about frontal offset test first. There was a question from Khalil Ahmed saying testing at 120 kilometers per hour will be more realistic. Look, please understand, a direct impact at 120 kilometers per hour, head on, that's likely to be fatal in any car. The reason why decades of data has been sort of brought and told to testing agencies to use a median or an average speed like 64 kilometers per hour is because all of that data comes from actual accidents over, tens of 50 odd years maybe. Don't forget that in most cases, people involved in the accident, the driver, they're also actively trying to avoid or minimize what is about to happen or what is happening, right? Yeah, sometimes the driver is unaware, but in most cases, the driver is reacting. So you could be driving faster, but chances are that you would already be braking hard at the time of the impact. So it's average speed data, average speeds at the time of impact. That's what's going into these tests. So you're trying to ensure a safe structure or a minimum threshold of safety in the most common scenarios for such events. Otherwise, I mean, you can make the argument that there should be a test for the speed of 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. I mean, the list is just endless. It can go on. Satish Kumar had asked this question a few days ago. No car is safe, even BMW or Audi or Benz, if you cross speed limit and get into an accident. See this side impact tested only at 29 kilometers per hour. Do you think it'll happen in real life? Okay, that's the point I made earlier, right? It doesn't matter what car. If you're driving recklessly, car can only do so much. Now, here again, the case of the side impact, or in fact, let's talk about the pole test because that was the specific speed that was mentioned there. There are many factors beside the inertia of the vehicle being tested. Extraneous circumstances could be very different across different accident situations. So first, let's acknowledge that. Typically, in the case of, say, that pole test, you have a situation where a car is trying to be brought under control. Presumably, it's losing some of its speed, but it is sliding sideways, and it's going to go and impact either an electric pole or a tree. Once again, it's average data that we have, and it suggests that this type of a situation, typically the speed at the time of impact in such events, where the threat of serious injury starts to go higher, is upwards of 29 kilometers per hour. And that's not what is usually happening. You don't really see these kind of impacts happening at higher speeds. Of course, if you go higher and you go, the car turns over, or there are so many other scenarios, yes, things can get much, much worse. We're talking about what typically happens. This also takes into account the speed limits, correct driving in many of these regions, which is something that becomes the responsibility of the driver in the first place, and which is what the cars are being designed and built for in many ways. So you may not like the logic of this answer, or it does not help when the situation is really extreme. You are right. But that's just the point. Extreme situations are not usually the common occurrences. So we have to try and sort of base ourselves, or at least tie ourselves to some kind of a tether which links to things most people would experience in such situations. And that's what that speed limit comes from. Okay, I hope that was helpful. And all right, let me try and see if there are any. And guys, please tell me if there are any questions I should be taking from Insta, because for some reason I'm not being able to see the live here on my phone. All right, no, here we are. We are back in action. Now I see it. And I will finally see some of these questions. Okay, lots of questions here, so thank you. But let me carry on with the questions I'm also seeing on my laptop.
There's a question Why did Maruti went for GNCAP? Why not GN?
All right. So why GNCAP and why not Bharat NCAP? We've seen a lot of cars going for Bharat NCAP, of course. And you know what? I actually have a question that is coming up, which is similar. So hold on to that. And it also relates to one of the myths that I had. So if you were to design a car that can withstand like 120 kilometers per hour. By the way, I just want to finish that point about speed because I can see here that people are saying this is not trustworthy, and that there's a different safety aside. Is the Victoris worth buying? Okay, yes, that's a question I will come to as well. I am Legend says answer fast as you can. Audi versus BMW versus Mercedes. Okay, now we're going off track. But coming back to that whole speed point, if you do design a car that, say, can withstand a collision at 120 kilometers per hour, then you can make the argument that what happens at 150 kilometers per hour, what happens at 200 kilometers per hour, how heavy is that car, how fuel efficient is that car, how expensive is that car. So we have to look at it from the perspective of how many people drive what kind of cars, most people in those situations, the speeds, what's happening in those accidents, data from different countries, and now a lot of data from India too, by the way, and reduce the level of injury that's being sustained in these accidents. This doesn't mean that the speed going higher than 64 guarantees fatal injury. Even then, the level of injury sustained would be lower than in a car which is like terrible, with its structure or its safety equipment. And so that logic applies almost like proportionate to the speed in some ways. So the second myth, which is Global NCAP is paid to promote new cars, and these tests should not be believed. World of Weapons has sent a question saying you can't trust Bharat NCAP. Every car is 5-star as per Bharat NCAP. Good that Maruti is sending it to Global NCAP. King Life says paid promotion. And then, of course, the question that was just prompted to me about why Bharat NCAP or why Global NCAP, depending on what is happening with the manufacturers. Look, Global NCAP is the OG here when it comes to testing cars that are made in India. All right, that's where the whole thing started, crash testing, etc. It was highlighted by Global NCAP. So there's a certain parameter or a standard that Global NCAP first started with. They've tried to make those tests more stringent over time, and so now we are on the third protocol. In fact, the Victoris is the first car to be tested under the new third updated protocol at Global NCAP. It is Maruti's choice to go to Global NCAP or to go to Bharat NCAP. Since many of you are seeing a slew of 5-star results coming out of Bharat NCAP, think about it. Maybe Maruti, and I'm not speaking for the company because I don't want to second guess what the strategy was, but with the Desire, with the Victoris, maybe it silences some of these critics, right? There are people who think that because Bharat NCAP is in India, it's easily manipulated. Like, it's Maruti's got them in their pocket. Then you won't believe a 5-star rating that comes from there, right? So maybe that's one of the reasons that they went with Global NCAP to say that, look, we want to have this stamp of approval. The guys who kept telling us our cars are 0 stars, 0 stars. How many cars were 0 stars? So many. Well, now maybe that's one of the reasons why Maruti went there. Is there a difference between those two tests? Yes, some of you have asked that question, and I'm going to come to that in a little bit as well. So we want to just pause and silence this iPad that's lying in front of me because it keeps tinging. That's where that sound is coming from. Please go ahead and silence it so that we don't keep hearing that ting. In case you guys are also hearing it, that's where it's coming from. There is an iPad in front of me where I'm trying to see some of your questions. All right, let's get back to it. The third myth that I want to deal with. These tests are designed to suit these cars. Other tests would unmask the car's true vulnerabilities. Look, I'm talking about why only frontal offset, why not a rollover test, why not a car-to-car collision. Star DS4SD, I think that's the handle, had asked this question as a comment, in fact, when we invited questions. 40-kilometer frontal collision against another car at the same speed is better, or a car at the same 40 kilometers per hour crashing into a fixed object? What's a better safety check? Yes, there are different tests. All of those tests are looking for different kind of data. Different kind of things are being tested in that. You're right. Two cars traveling at the same speed, very different kind of impact, different physics starts to apply. A car going at 40 or 60 and crashing into a fixed object, different physics. The idea is to improve basic safety threshold in cars. That's what Global NCAP is trying to ensure, at least. That's I'm speaking for Global NCAP, so happy to get a clarification. We are, I'm not from Global NCAP. Now, we are a maturing market. Every such test, whichever one it may be, it costs a giant amount of money. Even the test that Global NCAP did involuntarily, right, where they took cars from the Indian market, informed the car maker, and then crashed them. They got 0 stars, they got 4 stars, they got 5 stars. The car makers should be including these amounts in their R&D spends to begin with. Let's not forget, in a new car. Global NCAP was not mandated by anyone to come and start testing these cars in India. They have a larger agenda. Look, this is an organization that's trying to promote safety across the world. It saw that safety standards in India were poor. That's why in 2013 we started doing these tests. I was happy to collaborate with Global NCAP. And that was money that was coming from foundations that were supporting, charitably or otherwise, such initiatives. Bloomberg Foundation in this case. It did so to expose the poor quality of cars made in India. Now, that was 10 years ago. In the case of a voluntary test, like what you've seen now with Maruti, with the Desire or with the Victoris, or what we've seen with the Taigun from Volkswagen or the Verna from Hyundai, the manufacturer is paying to get the safety rating done. What are they paying for? They're not paying for the rating. They're paying for all the logistics, shipping the car there, lining it up. You have to send more than one because there are different tests that have to be carried out. So once your car is crashed from the front, structure is damaged, you can't then use the same car for a side test. So it doesn't mean that the test parameters change or that you get some kind of a discount on the scoring requirement to earn each star. No, they're just paying for the logistics. In fact, we've had many instances, by the way, where a car was tested. It required improvements. I mean, you had a voluntary test on the Kia Carens before the facelift. 3 stars. It's not like they got 5 stars because it was voluntary. Kia India shipped that car, Global NCAP tested it, got 3 stars. Very transparent. The manufacturer is allowed to, of course, go back, make changes to, for those improvements that may be required to get a higher score. The car then gets tested again. So Global NCAP will always release both sets of scores. You'll see, even with the Desire, first the old Desire was crash tested by Global NCAP. Then Maruti said, hold on, we're anyway coming up with a new generation. We want to improve all these areas. We'll come back to you. We want to do a voluntary test with our new car. Maruti came back, did that voluntary test. But both results were still declared to the public. Global NCAP will release both sets of scores. Please remember that. There could be 3 sets of scores if, more improvements are done. So you may go from 2 stars to 3 stars to 5 stars, whatever. The effort is to maintain transparency. Now, whether that is happening at Bharat NCAP or not, it's a question I do not have an answer to. What I mean is, are we only seeing the final improved score? Once, a test is done, they find something is lacking, they go back, they fix that in the car, they come back. So I'm not saying the test is fudged. I'm not saying that the 5 stars are wrong. I'm saying maybe we're only seeing the final test, the improved version of the car, which is the one that goes to market. I don't know that. And I'm not making any insinuations here either. All I'm trying to say is that when you see a string of 5 stars, these are the questions that come in my mind. I know a lot of you, the questions coming in your mind are these fake results? Are these fake 5 stars? Are they bought? Yeah, maybe we're thinking a little differently. I'm only worried about the transparency part here because I would like to believe that Bharat NCAP, the testing parameter, is still pretty strong. Now, seeing that final score with the improvements made, not still bad because then the car coming to market is hopefully the one with that final score. Who knows? Well, going by how NCAPs are working worldwide, I certainly hope it's being done the right way. I am Ajay Seth, had asked this question. Sid, waiting for the session on safety benchmarks. Okay, you're in the session now. I hope you're watching. Why do we need Bharat NCAP when we have Global NCAP? I hope I've answered that question. And what does each star mean in the safety ratings? For example, does a driver die in a car accident if it's just 2 stars compared to 5 stars? Okay, that second part, the first part I've answered. The second part is actually really good because a lot of you have this doubt. Now, sadly, Ajay, every accident is different. Its circumstances, the forces and parameters involved, the players, also the use of safety equipment, sometimes sadly the misuse, all of that plays a role. So we've seen high profile accidents, right? Cars with impeccable safety equipment, great standards, good build quality, where people have still succumbed to injuries because, something as simple as not wearing their seatbelt. I've had that happen in my own family. I'm sorry to say more than once. It's tragic. And it's not fair, therefore, to generalize when it comes to individual accidents or fatalities. However, in an effort to bring greater safety standards to millions of people, we simply must try and use all that collated data that I've already explained to improve those standards. There is also a lot of fine print that accompanies a lot of the star ratings. Now, when you see the result from Global NCAP, you can go to Global NCAP site and there's lots of details about what that rating means. We need maybe more transparency on that, even from Bharat NCAP. People don't always understand what an unstable structure means, for instance. That's actually something I'm about to come to. But what I'm trying to say is that it's things like that that the NCAPs need to maybe also keep clarifying, and they're also modifying or enhancing that standard to carry on making safety standard go higher over a regular frequency. Okay, let me quickly scan to see if we have any more live questions here.
Skip the pin message.
All right, Anita Singh is saying, let me see. Hi, Siddharth. Hi, Anita. Are electric cars more or less safe than ICE cars? I was interested in getting the MG Windsor. Crash capability is crash capability, Anita. So EVs and ICE cars have to still meet the same requirement. Are there further things to look for with an EV? Yes, you don't want the battery to catch fire in the case of an impact. So you also want to see the battery integrity, how a battery is built. Yes, there are separate tests for that, and there are certain safety standards required by law for that. Those two things cannot be mixed up, even though they are related. So, to answer your question, in the case of a frontal crash test, if you need a certain number of points for that test to be good versus bad, it's the same logic whether the car has got an engine in the front or whether it has a battery under the floor. However, yes, what happens after the crash, in the case of an ICE vehicle, what happens with leakage of certain fluids like the fuel? What happens to the fuel lines? What happens to the electronics on board? You don't want the car to catch fire, even if it's an ICE vehicle. Of course, the same applies to battery vehicles as well. So the parameters with the powertrain change in terms of some of these other nuanced points. But when you see a star rating, you have seen Bharat NCAP, for example, now crashing some of the Mahindra EVs, 5 stars. In fact, the highest rating we've seen so far. We have seen a lot of ICE or EV, the hybrid cars. Hybrid is the wrong question. What I mean is hybrid platforms where they can be ICE or they can also be EV. Globally, we've seen a lot of these tests where the scores are similar. It's because the structure needs to be capable. It needs to absorb that impact. It needs to make sure that that impact is not going to the occupants in terms of all that force. Also needs to make sure that impact doesn't go to the battery, but the structure needs to be sound. And that's why actually I'm going to come to my next myth. Having said that, you can see more questions here. Which ADAS-enabled cars will you suggest under 30 lakhs? Okay, Abhishek has asked this question. Very simply, right now, the Victoris, because, it's got this great star rating from Global NCAP, and it has ADAS. But that's not the only car, of course. There's the XUV 700, there's the Kia Sonet. The Kia Sonet, we don't have a Global NCAP crash test, though. But it's nice to see a lot of cars at different price points coming with ADAS now. The Creta, the Seltos, a lot of them have it now. The fourth myth, which is an important one, which is what I was alluding to, the unstable structure. Sometimes you see that coming out in the result. 5 stars, or maybe even 4 stars, let's say, but unstable structure or footwell. This means that the car is a death trap. Safety or the star rating doesn't matter. Both things matter. When we talk about an unstable structure, let me explain this. It's a little bit difficult maybe to understand. It comes down to the pure physics and the science of it. Both things do matter. When we say unstable structure or footwell, it's about the load factor. Stay with me. That becomes the question mark. How much can you load onto that car? I'm not talking about like physically the weight. Yes, it's the weight as well. Just like I was talking about an average speed that's used during the crash testing, so is the load factor based on averages, which means how much you load a particular body part. How much stress does a particular part of a car take, in this case a footwell or the overall structure? That's what's being looked at. So it's not just, and when I say body part, I'm talking about the car. I'm not talking about a human body part. So how much would it need to withstand or carry during such an event? Sometimes you could have lesser people in a car during an accident. Sometimes you could have more people than what's even recommended by the manufacturer. 5-seater. You see people, you see 7 people in a car. You could also be carrying a lot of luggage or cargo, or you could not be carrying any luggage. So lots of parameters that change. So when structures or components are tested during such crash events in the tests, they're also being measured for the capability to withstand greater or lesser loads. Not just what is used during that single test, because in a single test, you may not have luggage. You may have safety equipment for monitoring the test that's in the back, right? Some of those cables are running through the car. You also have 4 crash test dummies. You're taking an average in terms of the weight, the height, the age of these crash test dummies, what they're representing. So it's an indication that a car may not be able to withstand greater load than simply what has been employed as the average situation in that particular test. And that's when an unstable rating kicks in. It doesn't mean the car is unsafe. It doesn't mean that the car is, simply a death trap. It just means that it can't maybe withstand more than what was tested. So at higher speeds, the implication could be a little less safety or a little less structural capability. It doesn't take away the safety rating. It doesn't take away, and it doesn't straight away make the car an unsafe car. I hope I've been able to sort of clear that. All right, let's take a quick look again and see here. Does 5-star rating take care of the various terrains like mountain driving? Typically, this is a question from Neha. Yes, the answer to that is it would take care of all kinds of conditions, because in the case of impact, in the case of any kind of extraneous sort of push or harm to the car's structure or to the occupants, it's the physics of it that's being measured in the case of a test, and not necessarily altitude. What will matter here is, of course, sometimes whether the car is going uphill or whether it's going downhill. In the case of some of the mountainous terrains, we are, of course, also worried about things like rollover, because, you might be pushed off a road. There are many other tests. I would love to see Bharat NCAP, for example, take such tests into account. You look at Euro NCAP, or you look at individual testing done by a manufacturer like Volvo. It goes way beyond what Euro NCAP requires. It goes way beyond what the Swedish government requires. Why? Because it's trying to take all these scenarios. You have the moose test, the elk test, animal impacts. You have rollover. You have the functions that cars have in ADAS now, where it's mitigation from a car going off the road. Sometimes at a higher speed, somebody falls asleep. The car will go off the road. Now you have ADAS that pulls you back. These are things that are also being measured, because these are situations outside of the ordinary. So again, I hope that answers your question. Lots of car-related questions now. I'm seeing a lot of which car should I buy questions. And you know what? Here's my promise. I'm going to scan through all of these and try and answer these to you, but I want to stick to the safety and crash topic for now. There's another question, like, for example, this question about hydrogen cars. There's an implication of safety there again. But are hydrogen cars coming? Should we wait for them? Now I'm getting sucked into answering this one. It's from Prabhan. They're coming. They're not coming in a hurry. And they're certainly not coming at price points that are looking at very attractive at this stage. So should you wait for them? No. Okay. This is a good one. Johnny's Place says crash on or by trucks and buses is not covered by crash tests and remain an issue. Okay. Absolutely fabulous question and a very valid one. You may have seen a lot of accidents. Sometimes it goes viral on social media where you see the front of a car has gone under a truck. There's a specific test for that. Yes, today the Global NCAP test doesn't cover for that. Not as Bharat NCAP. What happens in such a situation is that the point of impact is a little different from, say, the front of a car taking that impact. There are tests for it. Yes, today's scores don't have that included on a broader level. The good part, though, is that we're seeing a lot of this is down to government regulation too. You have to have certain guards by law on these trucks so that the car can't go under it. Now, this is one particular situation, so let me not digress. Your question was more general in terms of impact with larger vehicles. When you see such larger vehicle impacts, average, and I'm only basing this on averages, typically a lot of the accidents which are serious happen when the larger vehicle is static and unseen, unmarked, and the smaller vehicle drives into it. You've also seen that sometimes it happens where the larger vehicle may be, moving at a much lower speed because, say, in hill driving, for example, they're always climbing slower, they're descending slower. The reason I'm saying this is because when you look at frontal offset, that frontal offset test is taking all kinds of vehicles into account. And typically, because most accidents head on are offset and not absolutely headlight to headlight dead on, that test is taking a certain kind of a size of other vehicle. And that size corresponds to larger vehicles as well. Does it cover every kind of vehicle? No. Does it cover a situation where the other vehicle may be coming at a crazy speed? No. I will admit that it's not all encompassing, but to a certain extent, it is trying to take variety of other vehicle into account so that when you say frontal offset, when you say side impact, it's not only, oh, this only applies to a small hatchback. No, you could be hit by a truck, as you said. So it's trying to broad base an average kind of vehicle size and weight and not just one kind. Having said that, I would love to see very specific tests like this becoming part of the Bharat NCAP portfolio, but that's a completely other topic. Why aren't there more car-to-car crash tests? I hope I've answered that question because that's exactly what I would like to see. Yes, data from all these tests points to different capabilities within a car. So all the cynics, even from the automobile journalism fraternity who say, oh, these are very specific tests. It's like saying, just study for chapter 1 and 2, all the test questions will come from chapter 1 and 2. Yeah, okay, doing a frontal offset at 64 kilometers per hour, doing a side impact, doing a pole test. You're trying to overall enhance. There's only so much that you can do, right? If you had the provision, do 100 tests, absolutely. But manufacturers, agencies, time, averages, and costs. There's so many things that determine this. So I don't want to now repeat myself.
That's a good question. What other factors apart from physical body of the car contribute to car ratings?
Where is this question? Let me try and find it. Oh, it's on Instagram. Say it again. Who's it by?
It's by Hitesh.
Okay, Hitesh is asking,
What other factors apart from physical body of the car contribute to the car ratings?
what other factors besides physical body of the car attribute this overall rating? That's a great question. And typically we gloss over this. There's two parts to it. And if you remember the first crash tests, any of you who remember them that happened, the 0 stars, 5 cars crash tested, big headlines. If you don't remember this detail, all cars were 0 stars even before the test started. Why? Because they did not have some of this equipment. Equipment that is standard is also part of the score. You will achieve a certain competence based on that equipment. That equipment is not just the structure. That equipment is curtain airbags or seat belts with pre-tensioners, 3-point seat belts instead of just a lap belt. There are so many factors here that go into this because the point I'm trying to make is that by having this equipment as standard, you're enhancing your score. You could still have a great structure and you might still have good crash capability, but you may lose points because you don't have ESC as standard. The latest protocol that I mentioned, Victoris is the first car now from Global NCAP with the new regime, the new protocol regime. Earlier, 6 airbags wasn't required to be standard, even by Global NCAP, to earn 5 stars. You didn't need to have ESC as standard. You needed it to be at least available in some variants. And there was a percentage. And then a commitment from the manufacturer that over time we'll make it 100%. Now the new protocol requires it. At some point, ADAS will need to be standard to earn 5 stars. You've seen that happening already in Euro NCAP. Euro NCAP probably has the most stringent standards these days. Japan NCAP does. So you'll see a lot of things which maybe, like the first 5-star car we got, the Nexon, the first Nexon that got 5 stars, that Nexon in today's Global NCAP test will not get 5 stars. Because, it only had dual airbags as standard, for example. So many things were different. Even the structure requirements. So, yes, there are many things, Hitesh, that would be required to achieve higher scores. But simply one or the other will not give you a high score.
Pinned message.
Okay, there's a message from... a question from Sudarshan Mitra. Hi, Sid. Hi, Sudarshan. You may remember me from before. The Brezza and Grand Vitara were tested in Bharat NCAP, but the results were never made public. How safe are these two compared to the Desire and Victoris? Okay, first, I have heard those rumors too. We have asked and we have not got an official confirmation that such tests were carried out and that they have not been declared. Let's look at both scenarios. One, where they have been carried out, not been declared. Is there something to hide? Maybe. And should we be worried about that? Yeah, of course. Scenario two, that they haven't been tested, or they have been tested, but the results just haven't been declared yet. Maybe they're waiting for some facelift or some marketing campaign. Who knows, right? The reason I'm saying this is because the only thing we can base our judgment on today is what we do know. The platform that these cars are built on. So when you say that the Desire and Victoris, are they comparably safe? Are they similar? We can only go by what we can say is definite. Yes, these cars share platforms with those cars. Does that mean they are automatically as safe? No, it does not mean that. Has there been a shift in Suzuki's strategy of late? You saw that. The Swift has not been crash tested, but the same platform gave us the Desire. The two cars are structurally fairly similar. Is that a good assumption to say that, hey, you know what, would the Swift or the Baleno be kind of close to the Desire? It's a good guesstimate, not a definite answer. The Swift was also the first car from Maruti where we saw 6 airbags becoming standard. And then there's been a slew of 6 airbags standard. Now, an Espresso may have 6 airbags standard. Does it mean it has the same safety capability? No. Till an Espresso is not crash tested with this new equipment, I don't know the answer. So, no, it's not a simple answer, and we should not be assuming anything here either, for sure. All right, I'm going to take a second here to go and scroll through some of these questions because I've missed a few. Adventurous Eddie, it's good to see you because I know you have followed this safety journey with me. So you are saying, hello, safety first always. Hello, absolutely right. And I'm glad to see that there's so much awareness that some of you are also now propagating in your circles. That's also very important. There was also a question that had come in a little while earlier about side-facing seats. I'm trying to find that question here. Oh, there we go. It's back there again. Soul Food is saying, how safe are those side-facing seats? Can they really qualify for 5-star safety rating? That's actually a great question. Some cars today on the market still have side-facing seats. There is nothing in the law that says that we cannot have cars with side-facing seats. I want to also make a little caveat here, and this is not just in India. In many places, you have a special provision for certain vehicles which are used by paramilitary forces. So like a police jeep or like a vehicle used by commandos or the army. There may be specific reasons why, for quick deployment, the QRTs or the quick reaction teams, why they need to have side-facing seats. Those are special operation vehicles. So firstly, let's not confuse with those. Those are made under, let's say, a different requirement. The vehicles that are sold in the open market, which you and I can buy, they have to have certain requirements by law. Currently, there is nothing in our legislation that stops you from having side-facing seats. What I will tell you, though, is side-facing seats do not have 3-point seat belts. Structurally, it's not possible. There's no fabulous solution that has been created specifically for side-facing seats. That puts a big question mark on them in my book. I can confirm to you, if Global NCAP protocols, not just the current one, but even the one from last year, even the one from the year before last, if we strictly look at the fine print on the Global NCAP protocol, side-facing seats means you cannot have 5 stars. So Soul Food, to answer your question, my logic says side-facing seats means you cannot have 5 stars. What is the fine print at Bharat NCAP? We have asked the question. We are awaiting an answer. I certainly hope the same logic applies here because, by the way, the same logic applies in NCAP, which is the Australia-New Zealand NCAP, Japan NCAP, China NCAP. Side-facing seats are a strict no-no. They are a safety hazard. The biggest reason why, and that's the part many of you may miss, it's not just the safety of the person who's sitting sideways, who's not strapped. It's what happens to that person in the case of an accident. They are already probably doomed because they're going to have serious injuries, right? They will now use, or let's say they turn into a projectile. They will carry all that kinetic energy in the case of an impact and hurtle forwards or backwards or sideways, sadly, into some other passenger. And that could be the reason why even a passenger sitting in the second row or the driver who's nicely strapped, who has an airbag in front of them, still has a broken neck. I don't want to be macabre, but that's the reason why side-facing seats can be very dangerous. We saw Mahindra dropping side-facing seats in the very popular Scorpio, even though it had an impact on sales. Rural markets, there was an outcry. The Scorpio N, people wanted side-facing seats. The car was designed with side-facing seats. Then they said, you know what, we're going to drop them because we understand that without that, we're not going to. It's not just we won't get 5 stars. It's a safety responsibility, and I hope Mahindra follows that in other cars as well from here on. So yeah, side-facing seats, bad idea. Okay, here we go. This is a good question. It has nothing to do with the testing. Deepak V, fun question. Are you bored with Landsberg? Never. I almost look forward to the next opportunity because the part you don't get to see on camera, and maybe I shouldn't be saying this, is what else is happening there when I'm there. There's always something else happening. There's always something interesting. It could be European, it could be Latin, it could be some other region. Yeah, it's a lot of learning always. And even with the tests where I may have seen the parameter before, the outcome of the test, the analysis of that test, there's so much to learn. And there's so much anticipation. And by the way, I'm always cheering from the sidelines, hoping like hell that we'll have 5 stars, 4 stars, and not 0 stars, not 1 star. Because I want all our cars to get safer, obviously. We all do. Sandeep Sharma says, since the Victoris is available in CNG as well, did Global NCAP consider this while doing the testing? Great question. And yes, all the variants were considered. There were a lot of safety parameters. There's also stuff that's data that's provided by the manufacturer and stuff that the safety testing agency will also map by themselves, because you can extrapolate certain weld points, joints, structural components to know what impact it would have on what it is protecting or what it is surrounding. So this score applies to all variants of the Victoris. There's also the strong hybrid, don't forget. I drive a Mahindra Thar, says Ashok, but now want a more practical, fuel-efficient car with solid safety. With Maruti's new 5-star rating, is it a good option to consider? Eventually, it has to be your decision. Is it a good option? Yes. Finally, I can be happy about the safety credentials of this particular model. So that's how we are going to obviously look at it, because right now we are looking at it through the lens of safety. Many people have many other considerations. I urge all of you to have safety as your number one consideration. Is Toyota going to launch its version of the Victoris, says Raviraj Minawala? At this point, we don't have that indication. Logic says yes. At some point, maybe there'll be a version of it. If not exactly the same, something similar. That may go to other markets, may not come to India. But just like we saw High Rider and Grand Vitara, the chances are we will see something like this, though maybe for other markets. Because here there is a differentiation between Nexa and Arena. Toyota may not really want 2 very similar cars in the same showroom. But again, that's up to Toyota. Thanks for doing this, says Vaibhav. Dharmadhikari. Hi, Vaibhav. Thank you so much as well for being here. I'm looking for an upgrade from a Ford Aspire 1.5 TDCi. Brilliant engine. Yeah, brilliant engine. However, over the years, I found that it doesn't have... all right, I'm losing the rest of this question. For some reason, I can't read the rest of it. Enough running for diesel parts. Are you worried about spare parts for the car? Because I'm somehow not being able to scroll up and see the rest of this question. Oh, it says part 1 continued. So I'll wait for part 2. But look, with cars like this, you could also look at some of the third-party workshops. There are a lot of capable brands who are doing multi-brand workshops. This is not a plug for our brand. But what I'm trying to say is that you may find that there are warehouses that are stocking some of these parts. However, the older a car gets, the greater the chances that you'll have trouble with parts. And so especially if the same car or the same platform, the same engine family hasn't been seen across a whole lot of cars in the market. There was a point when Ford had that. Ford's been gone for a while now, so I would encourage you to start looking at a replacement. My consideration, here comes part 2, are good NVH levels, good ride quality, and highway dynamics. Okay, so we've moved away from the safety point. Here's the thing, a lot of cars with good structural safety will also give you a lot of that. You get a stiff structure, you get some really good handling. Ride quality is, of course, down to suspension. NVH is down to insulation. There are many, many such cars, and I'm happy to take this offline, Vaibhav. So why don't you go ahead and DM me, maybe on Instagram or Twitter or wherever, and happy to take this up with you. But yeah, a safer car typically tends to be a little bit better in terms of its handling because the structure is that much more solid. Can we expect, this is a good one, Ridhiman Mukherjee is asking, can we expect the Baleno and Fronx to get 5-star rating soon? I always expect. I expect all cars will get 5-star rating soon. Not like how we've seen the cynicism coming from Bharat NCAP, but what I'm trying to say is that I have more confidence today. Hardtech platform, Desire, Swift, Baleno. Baleno is sold as the Glanza here. It's also sold as the Toyota Starlet and many, 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 many other markets. So it's things like that that point to me having that hope. I would love to see crash tests proving that and vindicating that. Quick point here, don't forget the first car from Maruti that got a good score in an involuntary test was the Vitara Brezza. 4 stars. That was the car that Toyota took first. Don't forget, as the urban cruiser. That should tell you something. Okay. Now, let's take a look at what else we have here before we start to wrap this up. Speaking of side-facing seats, the new Bolero is around the corner. It'll be interesting to see if Mahindra can score 5 stars again. Very interesting, Sudarshan. I'm watching very keenly. Just like you, my full attention is on that. Because, look, I don't know if there's a crash test happening. I don't know if that car will be tested. There are certain pockets where maybe people still need those side-facing seats. I'm not sitting here passing judgment on that. But there should be a declaration then from the manufacturer saying, hey, in this configuration, the score doesn't apply. Let's see what happens. Most welcome, Vaibhav, and I'm waiting for those DMs so that we can take that conversation forward on finding you the answer to which car should I buy. Okay. Strong hybrid not offering ADAS, is that a deal breaker? Sandeep Kumar's question. This is a good one, and I know we're now starting to run on time, guys, so you please tell me when you want me to wrap it up, and we will. This is a good question, though, and currently the 5-star crash rating requirement, the current protocol from Global NCAP does not include ADAS. ADAS is the nice to have. The car's ADAS is coincidentally also being tested, and that might happen in the future. Don't forget, Global NCAP also, besides handing out 4 stars, 5 stars, also has something called the Safer Cars Award, the honor or the recognition for going beyond even its protocol. We've seen Tata Mahindra vying for this honor in the past by saying, hey, look, we're giving you even more stuff. Some of that is ADAS. Now, if Maruti is able to prove that its ADAS works really well in those tests, which are specifically designed for ADAS, maybe it will get that honor. So I don't want to speculate here. But what I'm trying to say is, currently, it doesn't impact that score. I know it's kind of weird that the strong hybrid doesn't have ADAS. I think maybe it was a pricing consideration, supplier consideration. I don't know. We've asked Maruti the question, but in their best judgment, they feel the car that needs ADAS is the mild hybrid. But ADAS comes down to your usage, your environment that you drive in, what sort of a safety or threat perception you may feel. Should everybody buy cars with ADAS? Look, it's also down to your budget. The good news here is that the 5-star rating is applicable on the standard safety equipment. It's applicable on the car's structure. And to me, that in itself is a lot of peace of mind. Should you get the car with ADAS? If you don't want the strong hybrid and you have the money for it, sure. All right, with that, I am going to wrap this up. There are a lot of questions that many of you have asked about other cars, about which car you should buy, what's coming up in the festive season. Look, it's a great time to buy. We have finally, after years, a reduction in prices, reduction in taxes. There is a huge amount of standard stuff that's happening, whether it's the wonderful screens or the smartphone connectivity or, of course, safety. There has been no better time than now to be an Indian consumer. Please enjoy that. Please also enjoy it responsibly. Ask the right questions. Push back. Demand more, especially when it comes to safety. Those of you with little children, please make sure they sit in the back. Please make sure you use a car seat. If you have any doubts about this, what kind of car seat, why you should force your child into a car seat, please reach out to me. Please wear your seat belts, front or back. because otherwise 6 airbags, 8 airbags, 9 airbags won't make a difference. Thank you for watching. Thanks for tuning in. I'm going to try and maybe use this as an experiment to do more such sessions. Instagrammers, did not mean to ignore you. Happy to go back and look at some of your questions. Please DM me as well. And yeah, safety. It's an never-ending quest to get better. Be more demanding. Also, don't forget your responsibility. Drive safe. Have a great festive season. Thank you for tuning in.